Hello everyone, good morning. My name is Jawwad Fareed and I've been launching products for the last 25 years. I run the startup bootcamp at Nest.io. I also teach the entrepreneurship elective at Habib University. When I'm not doing all of this, I run a risk consulting practice out of Karachi. As part of my work with startups and founders, I often run into a number of common misconceptions around the launch process. I thought I'll spend some time on this today. Before I do, I want to quickly walk through a list of qualifications. Your path and journey will be different. Number one. Number two, I've been a broke and hungry founder for a very long time, and while we've raised funding on multiple occasions, once you've done broke and hungry, it's very difficult to go back to any other model. Number three, an old friend used to say this on a regular basis, Jawwad, only fools learn from experience. Wise men learn from fools. It's in that spirit that I offer these takeaways. And yet, please don't take anything at face value. If something doesn't fit, doesn't agree with your ideas, please feel free to challenge it, question it, and post a comment on it. I'd be happy to answer any questions. On the issue of questions, I'm on Twitter, fairly active. My handle is rebootdude. If you have any queries, any reactions, any comments, any suggestions for improvement, please feel free to reach out to me on that platform, and I'd happy to engage in a conversation. So let's start. I'm going to quickly do a walkthrough first of the 6 lessons we are going to cover, and then we'll review them one by one. So myth number 1, launch is a terminal event. No, it's not. It's actually a series of overlapping sequences, which is lesson number 2. Lesson number 3 is, given a choice of formats of launch events, which one would you choose? A rave party or a class reunion? Think about this for a second. Of the two format, which is the one that has a better chance of starting conversations? We'll come back to this. Lesson number 4, what do bankers pay for? In simple words, the importance of validated profiles. Lesson number 5, you need a lot of content for your launch event. How do you make sure it's relevant? And finally, when it comes to exposure and coverage, what should you do? A one-day flood versus a drip feed. So let's start with the first myth. Launch is a terminal event. This is the one that hit me hardest, made me fall flat on my face with my first venture, MENA. I'm going to take you 20 years in the past. Chicago, Society of Actuaries, annual exhibition, October 2020. This is a very special date because it marks the launch of my first product as a first-time founder. At that point, my mindset as a founder was simple. Jawwad, all we have to do is build and ship. If we can build and ship, then we can demo and pitch. So it was in that spirit that we booked a stall at the Society of Actuaries annual exhibition in October 2000. We made the booking all the way back in February 2000 because we were working on a specialized product for the actuarial market. It was a hard year. An incredible amount of work, effort, and sacrifice went into making that product get to a stage where we had something to show for. And throughout that year, whenever we ran into trouble, whenever we ran into challenges, we'd simply tell ourselves, guys, it's just a few more months. Just survive. Just make it till October. Once we get to October, all of our troubles will go away. So October's here. We're in Chicago at the exhibition at a booth. We spent 2 days manning the booth, handing out collateral, collecting cards, talking to people, reaching out to partners, talking to the society to see if we could do something together with them, trying to structure deals. 2 days of intense effort. At the end of those 2 days, we sat down and asked ourselves, okay, so what do we have to show ourselves? And the answer was a bit disappointing. We had nothing. Zero. Zilch. Nada. Nien. Night. Our experience wasn't unique. This is something that first-time founders face on a regular basis. Disappointment, disbelief in how anticlimactic the days after launch are. Because, leading up to the launch, our take was build and ship, demo and pitch, and you'll have customers waiting to sign checks. But here we were, end of October, end of the exhibition, end of a trip, heading back, and there was nobody there, no customers, no checks, no money, no dollars in the bank. On the flight back, I wondered what I was going to tell my team. I wished at that point in time, if somebody had sat me down and said, Jawwad, remember, launch is neither the beginning nor the end. It's just a pit stop in the middle of a very long and hard journey. Just a pit stop, neither the beginning nor the end. So over the years, as I grew as a founder, as I launched more products, I began to understand that launch is a sequence. The question though was, what does this sequence include? What are the components? What are the phases? To answer this question, I'm going to bring you all the way back in the present. From October 2000, we moved to July 2020. Founder Puzzles is a book that I wrote that we launched recently, a few months ago in July. For us, the first phase in the sequence was pre-build. So pre-build is a very simple concept. You have a concept, you have an offer, you have an idea. It's not firm. You have nothing tangible, nothing to show for. You're months away from building and shipping any product, months away from your launch. So what do you do at this point in time? With the concept, with the idea you're working on. My recommendation is that you put it out there. Define the concept. Spend some time in figuring out what's the best possible way of putting it out there, and then put it out there. If you're a little aggressive, see if you can collect email addresses or even signups for a beta list. The objective of the pre-build phase is to start getting feedback and exposure. Start those conversations with customers. We understand that you have nothing to show. We understand that you're months away from a launch date, but start the process. See how people react. For lack of a better word, let that offer marinate in the real world. Pre-build for us, for Founders Puzzle, was November 19. To be fair, our first post actually happened 4 years before November 19. Because when we first came up with the concept, we said, this is a great idea, this is a great product, put it out there. So we put it out there. We didn't think we didn't think it would take 4 years to finish the book. It did. But anyhow, so we get to pre-build in November 19, and pre-build for us, we still were not sure of a launch date. So all we wanted to do was start a conversation with our target segment, and that's all we did. Pre-build for us was followed by pre-launch, and pre-launch actually started in May 2020. For us, the trigger for pre-launch was the launch date. We were now sure that we'd be able to ship the product in the next few weeks or month. It was almost done. Cleanup was required. We were trying to sort of get things sorted out. But we were sure that we were looking at a ship date within a few weeks. So May 2020 started the pre-launch phase. And in the pre-launch phase, the primary difference with pre-build were two things. One, in pre-build, we just wanted to start a conversation. We were not collecting email addresses. We were not collecting signups, but we just wanted to start a conversation. In pre-launch, we wanted pre-orders, or rather we wanted to build the momentum for pre-orders. So that was one. Two, in terms of exposure and coverage, pre-build was essentially passive exposure. We weren't aggressively promoting it. In pre-launch, we pressed the button and went straight to DEFCON 3. Both the frequency, the tone, the mode, and the range of exposure changed in pre-launch for us to pre-build. The idea was to build momentum for the main launch event. So May 2020, the pre-build phase started. And for us, I think it finished right towards the end of June and early July when we put up the pre-order page. Launch for us was end July. Now, going back to the Society of Actuaries exhibition in October 2000, launch meant a conference, an event, an exhibition, a round of conferences or events or exhibitions. In July 2020, launch means something completely different. All it means is that you're ready to process orders. You're ready to ship to customers. So what comes after launch? Post-launch. Post-launch is the most interesting phase in the entire launch sequence. For us, post-launch was August. Post-launch also has two parts. The first part is easy. You look back at your experience. You learn from the mistakes you've made. You follow up with customers who haven't converted, leads that you've generated that haven't turned into orders. And you think about how to apply these lessons next time. But it's the second part which is the most interesting part of the post-launch sequence. The second part is when you sit down and plan the next launch sequence. So what are we saying? We're saying launch is not a single event. It's not a terminal event. It's a sequence. It's actually a series of overlapping sequences. Think about this for a second. What comes after a book launch? What comes after the first edition? A first edition is followed by a revised edition. A revised edition is followed by a second edition, a third edition, a fourth edition. To be fair, this has been true for most of the books I've written. Portfolio optimization models in Excel is now in its third edition. So first edition, revised edition, second edition, and third edition. Reboot, third edition. Founders at Work, revised edition. We started work already on the second edition. Model at Work and Option Greeks Primer are with Palgrave Macmillan. So I don't control the rights, the publisher does. The publisher decides when's the right time for a second edition. For textbooks, there is actually a fair bit of time between a first and a second edition. So it's quite natural to ask at this point, why make things so complicated? Why do we need a sequence of launch events? To answer this, we have to take a step back. What's the objective of a business? The objective of a business is to generate a stream of orders, a steady stream of orders. Hence, if that's true, then it follows that the objective of a launch sequence is also to generate orders. We often use the word flow for this steady stream of orders. So what is the flow equation? Let's take a look. The flow equation is essentially your sales funnel. It starts with starting conversations. Conversations lead to connections. Connection leads to conversions. Conversion leads to customers. Customers lead to orders. Orders translate into dollars. That's the sequence. Conversations, connections, conversions, customers, orders, and dollars. So if the objective of a business is to generate orders, and it's conversations that start the stream that ultimately ends up with a stream of orders, it follows that the objective of launch sequence is to start conversations. Generating flow for startups is hard. If you have established business, flow's taken care of. If you join a team that's been doing business for a while, flow's taken care of. Flow happens in a normal sequence of events. But for a startup, you have to start the flow process. You're responsible for it. So generating a stream of orders is difficult. Generating a steady stream of orders is even harder. Getting to the stage where you have a stable flow of orders is the hardest thing in the world, which is the reason why you need a series of sequences. You're going to stay in this infinite loop of launch sequences till two things happen. Either you achieve stable flow or you run out of funding and runway. There are no other choices. How do we start conversations? Given a choice between rave parties and reunion, which one should you pick? I gave you a hint right at the start, right? Think about this. Of the two, between rave parties and reunions, which one is better at starting conversations? A, rave party. B, reunions. To start conversations, you need an environment where you can get up close and personal with your customers. You need a space where conversations are a normal theme, where you can hear them speak, where you can listen to their challenges and issues, and also possibly get a word in. So where do you think that happens? Here or here? Rave parties and concerts or reunions? A or B? You need a space where reaching out to people and starting conversations is normal, in a setting where you can hear them speak, listen to their challenges, issues, and problems. Conversations lead to connections. Connections lead to conversions. Conversions lead to customers. Customers lead to orders. Orders lead to dollars. That's the flow equation. The equation starts with conversations and connections. Look for formats that help you start conversations and build connections. Here, A or B. The concert/rave party is basically an analogy for the conference circuit. As part of Alchemy Technologies, the risk consulting firm that I run, we went through the conference circuit for many years. GITEX, MIFTEC, trade exhibitions, trade delegations, the PICTA, ICT awards, and multiple vendor events across the 6 or 7 years we were actively selling software. Side by side with the conference circuit, we had an alternate circuit, which I called the training circuit. The training circuit was the up-close and personal circuit. We ran model building workshops for our customers, the same models that we were selling as part of our software. We ran regulatory updates on reporting requirements and changes, the same reporting requirements that the models were used to generate. And we ran field interviews. The training circuit is the up-close and personal circuit. The training circuit is option B. The conference circuit is the rave party. It's the concert. It's option A. Which one do you choose? If we were to tabulate a score, you think we did better with A or B? Let's take a look. Here's a scorecard. The conference circuit over a 5-year period cost us $125,000 and resulted in 0 closed deals. We had some leads, not a lot of leads, but we had some leads. If I were to convert those leads on a per dollar cost, the amount is just unthinkable. So $125,000, 0 closed deals, some leads, but not enough leads to justify the expense. Compare this with the training circuit. The training circuit over the same 5-year period required a 0 spend. We actually made money because we charged customers for the workshops that we ran and generated in booked revenues of $2 million. In terms of pipeline over the same 5-year period, I would say that we did about $4.5 million. So not a bad conversion rate. Pipeline of $4.5 million converted to $2 million in revenues. That's a good rate. What do you think? Which one's better? Option A or option B? Given a choice as a founder and a startup, when it comes to picking up a launch event, when it comes to picking up the format for a launch event, when it comes to designing your launch sequence, are you going to design it around option A, the rave party, or option B, the reunion? I've been a little unfair on the conference circuit. The conference circuit has its uses. If you want to create exposure, possibly. Networking, yes. It's great education. If you want to do research on your competition, terrific platform. So there is a way to hack conferences that founders need to get comfortable with. And once you've learned how to hack conferences, conferences can be a very valuable source of intelligence. Sometimes you can also use conferences to break into a market, get some credibility, get some intelligence, get an outlook. It's a great event because you've got partners, vendors, competitions, possibly customers available at one location. So in all of that context, yes, exposure, education, networking, credibility, conferences have their uses. Launch, no. Remember, starting conversations, which format, which structure, which sequence, which event leads to a higher chance, a higher probability of starting conversations. My first big challenge, the myth that made me fall flat on my face, was launch is a terminal event. We spoke about that earlier, the Avacene example. My next big one is validating profiles. As founders and startups, we're all very comfortable with audience profiles. We all build them. Customer personas, audience profiles, target segments. That's the first thing we do when we start working on an idea. But it's not enough to build personas and profiles. You also have to validate them. This validation process requires a fair bit of work. I spoke about Alchemy Technologies earlier. At Alchemy Technologies, we built multiple products, all of them focused around the concept of risk. The one product that got us really, really excited was Pakistan Risk Review. It was focused on the information needs of a treasury team in the banking sector. The timeline was 2008-2009. The world had seen a major financial crisis. Oil prices had peaked to $147 and then slipped to $30 plus. My local market, which is Pakistan, The currency had depreciated by over 50%. There was a lot of turmoil, a lot of change, a lot of uncertainty. And in that environment, we felt that a print publication that looked at historical trends and gave you a sense of where the market was going would be well received. But we were wrong. It didn't work that way. And in terms of context, I just want to set things right. This product that we put together was not the product of a startup. We were already doing over $500,000 a year in revenue. We were well established. We'd been in the space for 5 years. We'd looked at a lot of data. We had a huge list of established relationships and connections. We were established business when we came up with Pakistan Risk Review. And the product fell flat on its face. Luckily, it was not the only product we were working on. Our biggest earner, the bread and butter product, was a regulatory reporting tool for the banking industry that had done exceedingly well. But when I look at the difference between these two, between product A and product B, there's one factor which is common and stands out: field interviews. We did zero research on Pakistan Risk Review. We looked at the environment, we looked at the context, we looked at our customers, and we said, this is something that needs to be done. We should do it. The mistake that we made was not understanding that just because the product is there, just because we think it's required, doesn't necessarily mean that our customers would pay for it. And the rationale was quite simple. The rationale was almost everything that we were doing, everything that we put together was available in a digital form on platforms, on networks that banks were already a part of. So while it was nice to have, matte finish, 4-color print publication on the outlook of financial markets in Pakistan, that need was already being met by alternate solutions that banks had already paid for. Compare this to the risk platform that we sold. The pain was significantly greater. Context and the environment changed almost every day. Banks and bankers felt that it was safer to handle that uncertainty, that risk, as part of a product built by an established third-party vendor. Pakistan Risk Review, Alchemy Risk Manager. Same business, same firm, same target segment, same market. One falls flat on its face, one does well. The difference between the two? Field interviews. And this is the reason why I like the training circuit so much. Field interviews are natural extension of training circuits. You have a very different relationship with your customers. You're no longer a vendor. You're a teacher, an instructor, a guide, a mentor. And in that context, your relationship is very different. The conversation you start are natural. The connection you've made is fairly deep. The relationship is strong. In the sales and marketing world, we have a word for this approach called consultative selling or relationship-based selling, which tends to outperform transaction-based models. So the last 2 points before we wrap up. First, aligning exposure with your launch sequence. If your launch sequence is going to run for 6 months, you need to make sure that you have enough content to create exposure for the next 6 months. What is exposure? I wrote a book on financial modeling for founders and startups. It's called Founders Puzzle. Where am I showing that? I'm showing this book as part of a video on the launch sequence. If you're here and listening to this, there's a reasonable chance that you're either a founder or a startup or somebody who's exploring that path, and you're interested in finding out how the launch process works. In the midst of that presentation, here's me, Jawwad Ahmed Fareed, author of Founders Puzzles, a book on financial modeling. Relevant content relevant to the need and pain and problems and challenges of your target segment is one part, with the right messaging and a call to action. You see this buy now button here? That's the call to action. Without the call to action, without the ask, there cannot be a close. This is what defines exposure. Question is, how much exposure do you need? Which format, which template do you want it? Do you want a one-day flood where you generate an enormous amount of traffic for a few minutes or a few days? Does that work better? Or do you want to spread it out? And this is what we meant by aligning exposure. If your timeline, if your sequence, if the process you're using to launch your product is spread over 90 days, then you need to generate coverage over 90 days. It's not enough to generate it on a single day. Yes, there will be variations. Yes, there will be some good days, there will be some bad days. Yes, there will be days where you get zero traction, but if you spread it out, you have more consistent coverage. Somebody asked me, how do you move from conversion to customers? What's the difference? The answer is very simple. The reason why you want consistent exposure over a period of time is that customers take time to decide to make the call to buy or purchase your product. And in that time, we all understand this, right? In that time, our key objective is to increase familiarity. So if I'm more familiar with you because, I've been seeing relevant stuff that you've been posting that ends up showing up on my timeline, there's a higher chance that I may opt to buy your product. If I'm not familiar with you, if you're not doing anything to stay visible in a nice way, we're not talking about spamming. We're simply saying, I've been putting stuff out there that you found useful, that's helpful, that's helping build credibility, that's starting conversations, building connections, making it easier for you to say, oh, this guy knows what he's doing. He understands what his what my challenge, what my problem, what my issues are. I can trust him. Trust comes from familiarity. Familiarity comes from relevant exposure. Align your exposure with your launch sequence. How much exposure do you need? And what are the possible tools or types or formats that you can generate? Let's go back to example. Founder Puzzles, the book. The first thing we did while we were working in our pre-launch phase was to share ideas about our product covers. We asked our audiences, which one do you like? Do you like this color? Do you like this tagline? Or do you prefer something else? It's not just a question of creating exposure, right? You also want to get some buy-in from your customers where they have a sense of owning a small part of the product. That's one idea. If you're running a book project, share it. If you're building a product, do demos, ask people, ask customers, ask potential buyers their feedback about features that you're building. Put out a priority list. Which feature do you want out there first? You guys decide. We will build it. So that's one. Twitter threads. Long thread with relevant, reasonable, useful advice followed by the pre-order link. To be fair, we started doing threads in October 2019 and we didn't stop. Even now, at this point in time, we're still doing threads. Thread is an interesting concept. You share useful, credible, interesting, relevant advice with your customers. And sometimes at the end of the advice, you add a link, as I have over here, the pre-order for Founders Puzzles. But the concept again is starting conversations, building connections. Not everything leads to conversions. Not everything leads to orders. A lot of times the objective is you're setting the groundwork for a relationship. So that's 2. 3, concepts, summaries, extracts from the book, or lessons learned from your consulting practice, or implementation advice for software problems that you're solving. They're all relevant, good, interesting, useful ideas focused around your target segment, your audience persona, your customer profile, challenges, issues, and problems. Next, customer reviews. In our case, book reviews. Reviews are important data points that help buyers make the call to purchase. A good review dramatically increases the probability and chance that the customer will plunk down the money to buy your product. And then the last one, and this is the most important one. For any product launch, you need what we call primer text. Primer text is essentially copy that you use to introduce your product. The copy that's built around a high-level use case for your customer. You need multiple variations of this copy for multiple platforms and for multiple stages in your launch sequence. To summarize, remember, there are 4 phases in your launch sequence: pre-build, pre-launch, launch, and post-launch. Align exposure with your launch sequence. My last and final myth is the most difficult of everything we've covered so far: staying relevant. It's easy for me to say, create content that generates exposure across your launch sequence. But how do you make sure it's relevant? How do you make sure it's of interest to your customers? How do you get 80 people to run a half marathon in Karachi? I know that's the path and the route and the date of the event, but how do you convert them? How do you convince them? How do you get them interested? How do you become relevant to runners, especially road runners? So this is one of the posters we did for the Runners United Half Marathon in Karachi that we organized last March in 2019, about a year and a half ago. While from a design point of view, this poster is a study in tragedy, it's really, really bad, there is one thing that does stand out. It's this one line. And this says, Na chhed malanganu. In English, this basically means, please don't tease the person who doesn't care. So a malang is essentially a fakir, a person who really doesn't care about the world. He's driven by some internal fire or desire or philosophy or point, and he's so obsessed with achieving that goal and objective that he is completely blind to what's happening around him. Right? That's a high level definition. So na chhed malanganu is a very common line we use in our language and culture. How is that relevant to runners? As road runners, we get a lot of catcalls. We get teased on a regular basis. My favorite one is in one of the marathons that I ran, right at the dead point, at the 17-kilometer point, I was done. And if you walked by me at that point in time, you would have walked by me faster than I was running. I was just in a shuffle. I was just trying to make sure that my feet kept on moving. And at that stage, at that point in time, a car filled with young kids slows down to a crawl, matches my pace, and says to me, I'm going to say it in Urdu, then translate it. So the car stops by, high school kids, out for a joyride. They look at me and say, "Haan be mote, tu to jeet gaya." In English, "Hey fatso, yeah right, sure you're going to win." Or the perennial, ever favorite, "Nange, kapde nahi tere paas." Again in English, "Don't you have any clothes to wear?" Because I'm running in my kit. So, imagine, running around town early in the morning, 6 a.m. on a weekend, in your shorts and your vest and your jerseys, and being catcalled all over the place. Men and women, both. And hence the term, Na chhed malanganu. I don't care. Leave me alone. I'm going to run on these roads irrespective of what you think or say. Na chhed malanganu. That's relevance. Because it speaks directly to the heart of road runners in Karachi, in our part of the world. That's what I mean by stay relevant. So quick wrap up. I'm going to summarize everything we've done very, very quickly. Myth number 1, launch is a terminal event. No, it's not. It's neither the beginning nor the end. It's a series of overlapping sequences, and that sequence includes pre-build, pre-launch, launch, and post-launch. One is not enough. You have to do more. You have to do more because the objective of launch sequence is to generate stable flow, is to get to stable flow. You will remain in this infinite sequence of launch sequences until you achieve flow or you run out of funding and runway. Given a choice of launch formats, rave parties over reunions, conferences over up-close and personal events, which one would you choose? Ask yourself, what starts conversations with your customers? For me, rave parties were essentially an analogy for conference circuit, and while the conference circuit has its place in terms of education, in terms of intelligence gathering, in terms of finding out what your competition is doing, it is not a good choice for a launch for a startup. Remember, broken hungry founder, right from the beginning. If you're a broken hungry founder, do not do a rave party. Do an up close and personal event. What do bankers pay for? We built many products for the banking industry over the last 15 years. Some did well, some did not. The ones that did not do well, the ones that fell flat on their face, the ones that were total disasters, were products that we built without doing field interviews with our customers. Products that generated millions of dollars in revenues. Every single product that generated millions of dollars in revenues was built on a foundation of field interviews. Make sure that you have validated the profile of your customers before you commit to a launch sequence focused on them. A good launch sequence relies on relevant content. If the content is not aligned with your customer profile, to the pains, to the challenges, to the issues, to the problems they face, your launch sequence will misfire. Finally, when it comes to generating coverage, given a choice between a one-day flood where you're generating and posting coverage and exposure right at the start, right at the beginning, or right at the end, opt for a model where you spread it out. If your launch sequence is 90 days, make sure your exposure and coverage plan is in alignment with those 90 days. Don't do everything right at the start or in the middle or in the end. Spread it out. Why? Because the step between conversion and customer is bridged by familiarity. Consistent, positive, relevant exposure breeds familiarity. In the sales and marketing world, customers buy from people they like, people they trust. To build trust, you need familiarity. To build familiarity, you need exposure. Relevant, positive, applicable exposure. Stay relevant. With that, we're done. I have to do a quick plug for Founder Puzzles, revised edition, the book that I wrote on math that matters for founders. As founders in startups, we often face common challenges and problems, also questions that need quick answers. The book focuses on frameworks that helps you get those answers. You can pick a copy, order it at bit.ly/founderpuzzles store, or just do a Google search on Founder Puzzles and the link would pop up. Thank you very much for your time and patience today. If you have any questions, challenges, issues, queries, or comments, feel free to tag me on Twitter. Just want to reach out, that also works. Reboot Dude is my handle. I look forward to your comments, reactions, and feedback. This is Jawwad Farid signing off for Founder Puzzles.